aristocrat of crookery, my dear man. No, I must devise something royal, unsuspected, sensational.
Anything that allows you to carry the contents of a barter through time can be considered money. So in the United States, we don't really have in our school system anymore. It's deliberate. They've taken out virtually all education about economics. So we treat money in a very odd way. We don't educate about it, and thus people get into trouble with it. This is designed. This is part of the bugs fucking around with our society. They want this to occur because if we were educated about money, we would use it in an entirely different way, and we wouldn't be so easily duped about money and what it is and how to work it and so on. So money in and of itself is not a thing to desire. In a barter, you rarely say, I want money for money's sake, right? You never want money just to have the money and let it sit there and rot. Or get the silver and bury it in a hole in the ground. The point of the silver is that later on you will trade it for some wants or needs that you're moving through time with the currency. Money has this issue with it of interest, okay? But it also has the attachment of debt, both of which are intimately connected with time. Now, it's complex as fuck. There's layers upon layers upon layers. They've got debt so well defined that there's whole new language you have to learn just to understand what kind of debt they're talking about and how it applies, and the machinations and the nuances and the slicing and dicing of it all, the refinement of it all, right? We come to this point where this was great. We started off with a barter economy, and yada 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 yada. Thousands of years later, here we are with a very sophisticated time management technology that we call money. And money, by the way, has multiplicity of form. So money can be any number of different kinds of things, and many times you will be dealing in a money transaction, but because the language is being used and there's seemingly no money involved, there's no species, there's no currency, you lose track of the fact that you're actually in a transactional money-based system, right? We have all of these ideas out there that are running around in the blogosphere and polluting the blogosphere, in my opinion, corrupting the thinking of people, but they're able to be corrupted because they don't have a grasp, because they've not been educated in the nature of our transactional universe, the nature of the species that we use to accomplish those transactions and to move them backwards and forwards in time. Now, this needs to be harped on because you have to understand some things. Because people have had no education in our transactional universe and species and wants, needs, times, etc., we end up with this shit that is central banking. Basically described as Western private central banks. All right, so that's bad thing number one, right? So all the nations that have a private central bank, which we do, the Federal Reserve is owned by private individuals, not by the government, not by the people, and it's an instrument, it's a vehicle for creating debt that is put on all of the people that live in the United States and handle our species, because they put the debt on the money, and thus anybody who deals in that money automatically acquires debt to the central bank. And so they're an evil fucker, right? And so the central banks have to go. When they started this country, we went through this is the fourth episode of a private central bank in the United States. All of the three others have failed. All of the three others beggared the country. They made us all poor and brought us to the conditions that we're in now, right? Because they polluted the money with debt. And so they all collapsed. And so this time it's going to collapse, but this is a good point in history because we're going to collapse all of the central banks. This whole central banking club, the cabal, that when people reference the cabal, all of these kind of words for the bad guys, for the collection of the bad guys, they're really talking at their core about the central banking gang that runs all of the planet. And this is under attack now, and they're dying. They're fighting a defensive retreat now because these guys are basically the deep state. So when you think of the deep state, you're thinking of the people and the institutions that support and run and provide for the central bank to keep us all as debt slaves. So these are evil fuckers. They're not your friends, right? Do not be deceived in any way, shape, or form. And if they're going to give you money, there is something that is attached to it, which is a debt, and you owe interest for them giving you that money. So understand that right off, okay? Now, we have a bunch of very hopeful people that have not ever been educated in money, have no sophistication with it, and they're being sold a whole shitload of falsehoods. And these falsehoods are the Gesara, the Nessara, which are global, supposedly this is a national system to give everybody everything that they ever wanted in the way of money so that all of their wants and needs can be instantly brought forward because they'll have enough money to buy everything. And Gesara and Nasara are these things where the con wants you involved in it. They want your mind thinking with it, and so they want you to do things like, just like with the Iraqi dinar scam, okay? The Iraqi dinar scam wants you to constantly think about and keep your mind occupied on it so that you don't allow any other negative thoughts about that scam, and they do this by having you concentrate on these humanitarian things that you must present to the bank when you get your supposed free money. Now, when in reality has money ever been free? It's never ever been free. There's always debt and interest attached to it, but this is a level of scam that goes beyond the central banking. And it is taking advantage of people that have never been educated on this. And along with this, we have the quantum financial system that Charlie Ward and Simon Parks and all the connecting consciousness places and all of those kind of guys pimp out. Bear in mind that even Charlie Ward will tell you that the whole idea of the quantum financial system is that everything in the world is going to be digitized and put into a computer so that they'll know who owns everything. Somehow this makes a difference. I don't know how it's supposed to make a difference. And I don't know where that computing system would be that you could ever do this, nor do I know where you could get the approximately 4.5 trillion people that would be necessary to do the digitization and put all this shit into code and then actually digitize the data and so on. We just don't have the humans around to do that. Because Charlie Ward is talking about digitizing every fucking tree and all of this kind of shit. He's just full of it. But all of these things here, are preying on individuals that don't understand you cannot create money from nothing. There's the other one too. That's the Saint Germain Trust, right? Trust. This is supposedly the trust that financed the United States, that has all of the money in the world, something like 10 umpty Googleplex dollars or something, because they've had money earning interest since the 1700s. That's the rationale here. Okay, so think about that for a second. They are saying that ever since the signing of the Magna Carta, that there's been money put aside and that someone's paying interest on it, and that they now have 10 gazillion dollars or $1 trillion or whatever. They can finance the whole fucking world off of the St. Germain Trust and give us all money. Well, the instant they do that, because money is an issue of scarcity, the species itself is scarcity that allows it to travel to make the transactions travel through time. Instantly, as soon as everybody has everything, it's worth nothing, right? So if all of the streets are paved with gold, gold is a rock. It is not money at that stage. You can go out and pick up a chunk of gold out of the street, but who's going to give you anything for it? Because they could go and do the same thing. So it is scarcity that allows something to be a species to travel through time. And so not very much scarce about dollars. That's why they're not doing very well traveling through time. A whole lot is scarce about silver. That's why it's doing really well in getting things traveling through time, but it's suppressed by the central banks, because if they didn't, it would do so well that it would show that their offering is shit. And you should, it's too crude, but this stuff here is worth exactly as much as a square of toilet paper. It's paper, right? And so now we deal with the concept of scarcity applied to everything on the planet, because scarcity is what drives human. It drives our wants and needs. If we could say, I want a ice cold pop, and it instantly popped in, appeared in my hand, like magic kind of thing. If we could do that, then our social order doesn't need money. We don't need any of these kind of technologies, etc. So it is the scarcity of things relative to our wants and needs that drives this entire system. All right, so these things will never happen. The St. Germain Trust has no money. It doesn't exist as these people claim. All right, because here's the thing. They're saying that somewhere they put that money aside in the 1700s and they've been adding to it. Well, where would you put such money? Would you put it in a cave? If you're putting it in a cave, who's paying interest on it? Who's putting down interest on it? Because you're not loaning it out to anybody. Oh, maybe you gave it to a bank. That's it, you gave it to a bank. The St. Germain Trust put all their money in a bank in the 1700s, and that bank's been paying interest out ever since on that money because it's been loaning it out in this thing. Well, the problem with that is we don't have banks that have been in existence from 1700s that have anything near the amount of money being claimed by the St. Germain Trust. And if the St. Germain Trust had that kind of money, then it would have all of the money in the world and no one would have any money whatsoever. Just the way that it works, because it's a scarcity thing. St. Germain, there's no bank that has survived. There's no banking system that has survived all the and all this kind of shit since the 1700s. We've collapsed banks repeatedly. In the United States, we collapse our banking system quite routinely. We had the collapse of the first central bank in I think it was 1830s. Maybe it's earlier than that. Then we had the second central bank try. It ran 19 years. Then we had the Dixie banks in the central part of the U.S. There was another private banking system. It lasted about 22 years. We've had the Federal Reserve. They've done really well with that. It's lasted over 100 years. But it's long in the tooth and it's dying now. There's no purchasing power left in here. There's so many of these things flooding the planet that they're worthless, right? You can just pick them up off the street. So this is the understanding of money. Okay, so now Gessera and Nacera are supposedly these things where hundreds of countries have signed this document saying that they will liberate their people from the debt instruments and give them money to do all this kind of stuff. And sure, they can give them money, they can give them dollars, yen, whatever, but it won't be worth anything and you won't be able to buy anything because it is scarcity that allows shit to travel through time. So you actually now are in an interesting position. You have to take non-scarce items, digital dollars or digital yuan or whatever, to buy scarce items because you know that this is real money. So you have an intermediate vehicle that is the debt instrument, and you can use that to buy real money now. This is a very interesting situation. It used to be that you would work and someone would give you silver for your labor. It's been that way through the ancient Greeks, all the way back into the Egyptians, back all the way into the Bronze Age. And, back thousands of years. You would labor, they would give you silver, they would give you species that you could carry forward through time. When we got into paper, they could print as much paper as they want. It changes the ratio of paper to hard species, to hard currency, to hard money. And it pollutes everything, and this is where we're at now, where they are able to proffer the idea that there are these things, these scams, these are actual illegal kind of scams, right? Nobody's ever going to do this. They're trying to scam you. They're always going to try and get something out of you for this information. They want you all whipped up, and they're trying to get you roiled up to where they can sell you something through these efforts, right? The central bank is a scam, but they're legit because they've ingratiated themselves with our government, and so they've been given the status of producing the specie, the money that we use to make our wants and needs travel through time. And so they are official. But it doesn't make them any less a scam. And they are, in fact, scamming their way by printing so many of these things. They're scamming their way right down to the point where we won't have to deal with them anymore. Now, this is an interesting situation in time, because right now, 2022, we're going to go through a period of time where all of the central banks are going to die. They're going to puke out their guts, close their doors, and go away. This will be very, very, very chaotic. It won't happen overnight. There'll be a lot of chaos leading up to it. There will be major economic blows, crashes, and then at some point, the banks will sort of fade. Now, the good news is we have in place nascent systems that can provide for us the species, the money that we need to make all of this work. And we know so much about the technology now that once we get rid of the deep state and the central banking system, we won't have anybody offering any of this kind of shit. We'll get back into educating people about real money and how money works, and having to work for silver educates you, and you hold on to that shit because it's not paper. It doesn't blow off a tree, so to speak, right? But once we get rid of the deep state and the central banking, then we can concentrate on this aspect of stuff without this aspect. And debt and interest at that point does not become automatic. So there's no debt attached to my silver, and there's no interest attached to it. So if Saint Germain existed in the 1700s, they would have been dealing in silver or gold coinage. We're not dealing in a lot of paper money. There was paper money circulating, but it was not the common vehicle for transactions. And so they could have put all their gold and silver into a cave, but no one's going to be giving them interest. It's not going to be growing, right? So you have to understand all of this shit in a broader context. But anyway, so you could and can loan silver. If you were able to acquire a bunch of it, you could loan it out to somebody, and they could have a scheme, and they could make a profit off of that silver, investing it in wants and needs that then they make goods to satisfy someone else's wants and needs, and they make a profit in the sense of making their scheme is good, and they make more silver than they cause to be expended on it. Then you could take out of that profit interest for loaning in the silver going forward. But in that system, you don't have debt simply by acquiring the money, the specie that is supposed to allow that trade to transact over time. So this is the evil part of it, right? The minute you work and they give you $1, you're in debt, because even in 1913, the minute that they printed that first dollar bill, it was worth less than $1. So it had less purchasing power than the face value. And so that was a scam from the get-go. And a lot of people didn't accept them. Okay, it took a long time for the central bank to get the status that it has now. It took it about 15 years. It went through a couple of crashes. They closed the stock market as a result of some shit going on. There was the world, which really threw everything off. They killed a bunch of people in the Titanic and the Lusitania. They took down a lot of bankers that were opposed to the central bank eating our nation here in the United States.
Colonel, you better take a look at this radar. What is it, son? I don't know, sir, but it looks like a giant dick.
Yeah. Take a look at it, starboard.
Oh my God, it looks like a huge...
Tanker! Oh, yeah. Wait, that's